Hello everyone, this is Direwolf20 and welcome to part 2 of my Factorization mod spotlight. Part 1 showed you some of the blocks that you are probably familiar with as well as a few new ones. For example, we checked out the parasive, which is pretty new. We checked out some of the power generation stuff, which is probably what you've seen before, and even showed you the ore triplicating stuff, which isn't that new either. But we did take a look at this nifty gadget right here, which is listed under the parts and machines section. It's the sockets, the socket block, and all the different sockets that you can put on this thing. Now this episode, I'd like to focus on some absolutely new stuff. We've seen a little bit of servos in the Forgecraft series. So while servos may not be totally brand new to you, pretty much everything that they do should be new because we've only seen a very small amount of what they're capable of. And we'll also take a look at this giant contraption here, which is the compression crafter. And if we get time, we may take a look at sculptures, and that'll probably about wrap up the spotlight. So for now, why don't I get started showing you compression crafting, and then we'll move on to servos, which are definitely going to probably be one of those items that takes almost an entire mod spotlight just to cover because they're so expansive. Alright guys, so first off, let's take a look at compression crafting. This is a nifty gadget. First off, you're going to need to get yourself some compression crafters. Okay, now these guys are going to require some dark iron ingots, but otherwise you really just need a piston and a crafting table. What you can do is go ahead and lay them out in the world and use them to craft things. So for example, if we were to go ahead and place something like this, on the inside, we'd have a 2x2 crafting grid. Now, what's cool is we can go ahead and place something like wood inside this 2x2 crafting grid. And what we should be able to do is come up with something that will craft us crafting tables. So if we put a barrel here for output, and we go ahead and put a button down, what we should wind up with, there we go, squeezed and crafting table. Neat. So what you do basically, as we see, is lay out the items that you want to craft in the world and go ahead and let the compression crafter do its thing. If you want to do a furnace, for example, it's really pretty easy. Go ahead and do that and hit the button and compressed, and you'll wind up with a furnace. Cool. Now, that might seem like that's a lot of work just to do a little bit of auto crafting. Isn't there some way to make this a little better? Well, there absolutely is. There's a couple options. Number one, you could absolutely do this with barrels. So let's go ahead and put a few barrels in here. Cool. And what I'll wind up doing then is, after I fix this barrel, just because he's not aligned right, grab myself a bunch of cobblestone. Cool. And what we can do then is compression craft with cobblestone. So let's take a look. There we go. Now the cool thing about this is that this thing can do, you ready for this? 32 crafting operations at a time. So in that one click, we just made 32 furnaces. How cool is that? So we can, of course, compression craft again, and boom, get another 32. So not a bad way to rapidly craft a bunch of stuff. Now, obviously, if you want to do something that's a lot, easier to do or a lot smaller, you can. You can do something like this and throw some wood in there, for example, and you'll probably wind up with something along the lines of some planks. Let's see. There we go. Cool. Now I know what you're probably thinking. How do I do something that's more complicated that requires items instead of blocks, like a piston? Don't worry, we have you covered. So what you can do is use the block form or use something that can eventually craft into the item that is going to be used in the recipe. So I use the block form of redstone and iron here, and this should wind up making me a piston, unless I did something wrong, which apparently I did. Let's try this. Hey, there we go, nice. So you can see that we did wind up getting a piston, but it's telling you that there's buffered output. And if we go ahead and grab this piston, we'll see that we get the excess pieces of wood, we get the excess pieces of iron, and the excess pieces of redstone there. Cool. So obviously a pretty nifty crafting mechanic. How you get those items into those crafting areas is up to you, but you can craft 32 items at a time, plus it looks really cool. By the way, one other note, the side of the crafting grid that receives the redstone signal is what's designated as the bottom of the crafting grid. So that's how we were able to put, the cobblestone and the redstone on the bottom here. That was designated as the bottom. So if you had your redstone signal coming from the top up here, then you'd need, cobblestone, cobblestone, and redstone, iron, and wood. And the outputting face needs to be on the back. So obviously it could be a chest or something like that. So in this case, we need the redstone signal to be up there instead of down here. This won't work. Alright guys, let's get started with the crazy world of servos. Servos are basically mobile socket blocks, and as a result, any item that can typically go on a socket block can go on a servo. So let's take a look. Servos. Here we go. Right? So what they do is they are mobile and can move along a servo rail. Alright, servo rails are pretty easy to make. It's just a little bit of lead in that dark iron ingot, and you'll get 8 of these guys, which is cool. The other thing they need, though, is power. So in order to get this, you're going to need some kind of power source and some kind of wire running to the servo rail. And when you place down the servo rail, you'll note that the wire connects to it. You no longer need this block underneath. I just placed it there to make it easy to place the servo rail. And now we're good to go. And we can run this rail however we want and whatever direction we want. So to keep things simple, let's just get a straightforward servo rail. What I'm going to do is place a servo on the rail. And what he's going to do is start moving. Cool. Look at him go. Good job, servo. And if we take a look at this thing with our logic matrix programmer, we'll see some information that's currently empty, but we'll see some more stuff once we've done more things to it. So right now, the little mobile block there is moving along, ready to do whatever we want him to do. Alright guys, so one of the first things I showed you with the sockets over there was this nifty gadget, the diamond cutting head. So remember, it needs to be placed on motors, and if we want, we can simply attach this right here, just the same way that we would have attached it anywhere else. Now what we can do is use this thing to cut anything that happens to be in front of this mobile little platform. Let's check it out. So just like we could cut blocks or ores or anything that this happens to go in front of, we can also use this to cut down sugarcane, for example. So we'll note here that when it gets near the sugarcane, it starts to spin, and we'll grab and collect the sugarcane on its little inventory there and hold on to it. So you can see the lacerator holding onto the sugarcane. Now it's got it, and it's carrying it along with it, and it'll happily collect any sugarcane that's in front of it. Neat. Now this thing is just a hopper, so if you look here, you'll notice that every time it happens to go over on top of the hopper, it's going to drop off a few pieces of sugarcane, but keep in mind the hopper can only transfer so many items at a time, so if you're really interested in making sure you get the best bang for your buck, I definitely recommend using an item shifter, but of course any mechanic to pull items out of this inventory should work just fine. Of course, this wouldn't be terribly efficient as a sugarcane farm because technically you can have sugarcane on both sides of the water, right? Well, let's set that up then. What you can do is use what's called instructions. Now there's a bunch of different ones. You can see them all kind of filling up my inventory at the moment, and you can read about them all if you really want to check it out. I'm going to go through most of them right now, but you can read them all about in motion instructions, value instructions, computation instructions, interaction instructions, but I'm going to show you a basic one right now, and it's called point top. Now the good news about these instructions are they're just computational instructions, and when you use them, you're just copying them to the wire. You can also right-click directly on the servo to have it applied directly to the servo, but what I'm going to do is apply it to this rail piece, so that when the servo goes over that rail piece, it's going to process that instruction and execute it. So I actually want to right-click with my logic matrix programmer to change the direction of the arrow that the point top is doing. Ta-da! You'll note now that it's pointing in the direction of the arrow. And if I come over down to this end here, and I change it with the logic matrix programmer so that it points that way, see the arrow pointing that way, what should happen now is that when it's going down one way, it should go like that, and then when it gets to this end, it'll flip to the other side. Cool, right? So we can use the point top to change the direction at which the logic or the little servo here is pointing. So it points the top in the direction of the arrow. Neat. To get rid of this instruction, shift right click with the logic matrix programmer and it will no longer occur. And you'll see here now that it's no longer going to turn its direction. Now what happens to servos when they hit an intersection? Well, I'm glad you asked. Servos have a basic set of rules that they're going to follow once they hit an intersection. In general, they tend to like to keep going in a straight line. So you'll notice when he came down and hit this intersection here, he wound up sticking and just choosing a random direction to turn. But now that he's on this line, he's continuing to go in a straight direction. You'll notice that here. So it prefers to go straight. or it'll try to go in the direction it's pointed by in the set direction command. So if we were to lay down a set direction command, which I'll put like right here, and I'm going to make sure that it's rotated this way. Probably, yeah, that's what I want. I want it to go that way. What it should do is next opportunity it gets, it's going to try and go down that direction. See? So even though we didn't actually put this instruction right here at the intersection, it just remembered, hey, next time I have an opportunity to go in that direction, I'm going to try and make that a reality. So I'm going to try and get that direction. Cool, right? So what we can see here is that we're saying, hey, you've got an opportunity to go that way, so do it. And he does. Cool. Now, similar to the set top or point top direction, we've got the spin command. What this does causes the guy to basically spin. He'll go one direction, and the next time he hits the spin, he'll go another direction, and the next time he spins, he'll hit another direction. So he'll kind of cycle through these directions so that he can go one after another after another. And if you want, you can shift right click to remove it, or if you right click, it'll just alter the direction of the spin. So this time he'll spin in the opposite direction. So now he pointed up instead of pointing the other direction. So you can see here, if we, reverse it again, we'll see that he points towards me again. And if we reverse it one more time, he'll wind up pointing upwards. Pretty neat. So you can basically have him rotate through all directions. So instead of having several set tops, you can just have one. And the next instruction here is a nifty one. This one, it's called trap. Basically what that does is make him stop. In order to get this guy moving again after he's hit the trap, you can either right click him with the trap, and that'll get him moving again until he runs into it. Or you can apply a redstone signal to the rail where he's at. So if I simply apply a redstone signal there, you'll notice that he continues moving along. Pretty cool. Something else that's neat to know is that having a redstone signal applied to an instruction will prevent it from executing. So you'll note that even though trap is still there, he did not get stopped. If we turn it off, we'll note that he does get stopped. And this, of course, applies to all instructions. So again, I've got one of these set point top direction things going on. You'll notice here that when I mouse over it with the Logic Matrix Programmer, it was showing a little redstone signal application there. If I turn off the redstone signal, now he should get his direction changed. Cool. Now the final instruction that's related to movement, by the way, these have all been movement instructions: set direction, point top, spin, and set speed. This is the one that we haven't seen just yet. I'm going to go ahead and install set speed here. You'll note that it's currently normal, which will set the speed to this thing to normal. If you find that it's moving too quickly, for example, with sugarcane farms, this thing actually is moving a little too quickly, and I'll demonstrate why. If I give you a point top direction here, and we tell him to point this direction, you'll think that he's going to be able to chop down the sugarcane. Well, actually, he moves a little too fast in order to do that, because by the time he realizes there's sugarcane there and starts spinning up, he's going to have moved past it too quickly. So let's slow him down a little bit. I'm going to set his speed. Now, sometimes he'll catch it, on the reverse side, but whatever. I'm going to set his speed a little bit right here to not fast, not faster, but slowest. Slowest speed will obviously slow him down quite a bit. There we go, much slower, right? Compared to the faster speed, which I'll probably wind up setting down here just because it'll take a while for him to get all the way back there at the slowest speed. But obviously this will help him to make sure that he catches those sugar canes when they grow. Now, I just set his to the fastest speed, so let's make sure that, yeah. He's definitely set to fastest, and you'll see he's cruising now, much faster than before. The only downside, of course, being that it's going to use more power for this faster speed. Keep that in mind. So frankly, guys, at this point, if you were looking to do some nifty stuff with these servos to automate things, and like I said, remember, you can put anything in front of servos. I'm just using this grinder as an example, but anything that can go on sockets can go on the servos. So look back to the last episode to remember what different things can go on sockets, and the servos can function the same way. They can right-click things for you, or they can suck up liquids. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do with these. If you wanted to, you could say, all right, I'm good. I don't need to know anything else about about servos and their instruction sets, or you could say, hey, I want to do some really complicated and in-depth and crazy stuff with servos. Direwolf, what do you got for me? And for that, I'm going to introduce you to the Servo's memory. Now, the Servo has a stack-based memory, which is a little bit similar, but not exactly like Forth, if you guys remember the old Forth programming language, because that was a stack-based programming language. So again, they're not the exact same thing, but they are similar in that they both use stacked instructions, and you can push instructions onto the stack and pop them off. So let's look at the servo memory here, and you'll see that each servo has two lists of memory, and you can see the contents of these lists by looking at the servo with this logic matrix programmer on your hotbar. If it's not there, you won't see anything. But if it is on your hotbar, it doesn't even have to be the currently selected item on your hotbar. Just as long as it's somewhere on the hotbar, you'll see the two sets of memory. The one on the left holds values, and the one on the right holds instructions. The subroutine instruction will add other instructions to this stack, and the instructions will be popped from the stack and executed until the stack is empty. So what do we mean by that? Well, the best way to do that is to show you how to use the subroutines. Now, subroutines are kind of neat. Basically, the way you write them is you set up a bunch of instructions for the servo here to follow, and then you can store them into a subroutine, which you can see right here. So as we can see, currently the instruction set just has this guy flipping up and down. So up, down, and then at the very end, he's going to go ahead and face that direction. I only did that there so that he would face away from the hopper. Now let's say we want to store this down, up instruction set into a subroutine. So first off, get yourself a subroutine. You'll notice that when you craft it, it's empty. Okay, so pretty cool. What we can do is now store this down, up command inside the servo, and then store those instructions in the subroutine. To do that, though, we're going to need the entry action. We're going to need to set that down right before he runs into this set of commands. The entry action tells the servo what to do with the commands it encounters, and you can tell by default there, it's set to execute immediately. Your other options are to read to the I/O stack. So it'll read these instructions and put them in the I/O stack. You can alternatively write from the I/O stack. So anything that you have in the I/O stack will wind up getting written to the rail. And then finally, you can ignore instructions altogether, meaning any instructions it encounters from this point will not be executed and will simply be ignored. Okay? The only exclusion to that ignore instruction is another entry action, because you need to be able to turn it back on, right? So instead of doing execute immediately, I'm going to do read to I/O stack. What this is going to do is it's going to start taking these instructions, the down, up, and store it in the memory of this guy. Now, after that's done, we want it to stop so we can grab a hold of it and, figure out what it's going to do. So we're going to switch it back to execute immediately mode, and then we're going to put a trap on the end to make him get stuck. You ready? Let's tell him to run. So we'll see here that now he switches his instruction set, and he's going to start reading like that. So you can see he just got 4 rotate top instructions. And I'm going to store them on the subroutine by shift right clicking with the subroutine. You can see now all those instructions came off of the servo and wound up in the subroutine. Cool. Let's take a look at what happens now, and I'm going to remove all this stuff. So now I can place the subroutine on the rail and go ahead and hit the trap, and what he should do is execute all 4 instructions sequentially. Neat. So he just did those rotations all in one go because he hit the subroutine there, that is rotate top 4 times. Cool. You'll notice here that he did rotate a couple times before he hit the trap. If we release him from the trap, he'll finish that rotate top command a couple more times, and you'll see he's basically executing them in order. So what happens is the rotate top instructions get pushed to the stack, and then they're executed one after another. And each time they're executed, they get removed from the stack. Pretty cool, huh? Alright, so now that we've seen how to set up subroutines, why don't I show you this nifty set of instructions called the value instructions. There's several things you can do with numbers and compare their values or add or delete or subtract them, etc. And this is going to mostly go onto the left side of the stack. So before I get through all these, why don't I demonstrate by pushing the number 1, followed by the number 1, and then telling them to do a sum, which is going to do the combination of the two numbers that are currently closest to the bottom of the stack. So let's take a look. I'm going to execute the trap, telling it to move, and if we take a look here, we should see it gets 1, 1, and then it sums it to get 2. Nice and simple. Shouldn't be, big revelation to you guys that 1 + 1 = 2, but that shows how it works. So you'll notice that before, everything was on the right side of the interface here, saying these are the instructions that are going to be executed. Well, now this stuff is on the left. These are numbers or values that are being stored. Cool. So we can go ahead and execute this guy again, and we'll see what happens when he passes back over it. So he'll come back here, he'll get stuck at this trap one more time, and we'll wind up passing over, and we'll see now we're pushing these two numbers back onto the stack. Interesting. And if we combine here again, we'll see two more numbers going on, and then it combines them. So you'll notice that it took those top two numbers from the very top of the stack and added them together. Cool. And if I throw down two more sums, it should do 2 plus 1, and then it should do should give you 3. And then the 3 plus 1 should give you 4, and then it'll stop. And if it comes back through here, it'll do 4 plus 2 is 6. And the sum there didn't do anything because there was only one number on the stack. So let's do all the value instructions that we can do. First off, you have compare, which takes two values from the stack and compares them. And the first item popped off, or the top one, will go on the left side of the comparison, and the second value will go on the right side. So if you have, like 2 less than 3, something like that, 2 greater than 3, etc. The cyan underline there indicates the bottom of the icon. You can also get push integer, which is exactly what we saw, the pushing the number 1, that's this guy. You can also change this to go 0 or -1 if you want. Your next set of instructions there is to push a boolean, be it true or false. You can do sum, which we already saw, pushes two integers and gives you their sum, or product, which gives you their product. So the sum does plus, and the product, which is around here somewhere, product, is a multiplication. Cool. So the next two instructions here are a little less intuitive, so I'll show you them in game, and that is drop and duplicate. So let's look at duplicate first. Duplicate will take what's currently the top item on the stack and add another one. So if I let the duplicate function run, which is right there, you'll see that we get a 6. So it duplicates it. And the next one is drop, which just removes one item from the stack. So if we go ahead and let this run, he'll go ahead and remove whatever is currently on the stack. Cool? All right, guys, and one more thing to note here when you do have the book open, if you're having trouble reading some of the numbers because, for example, on this screen they're yellow, go ahead and hit the S key on your keyboard and you'll get a darker background book. It's going to work out for you pretty well, I think. Cool. So now that we've taken a look at those, let's go ahead and look at computation instructions. So we just looked at value instructions. Those are what modify values. Now we can take a look at computation instructions. There's a couple cool things in here, specifically the jump command. We already looked at entry action. This is the one that tells you to execute immediately, read or write to the stack, and ignore all instructions. But what we can also take a look at is jump. So let's see what this does. So jump can go ahead and indicate to basically ignore the next instruction it finds. I'm going to set it currently to unconditional skip. Now this will only work on the very next servo rail, not the next instruction it finds. So if we had this guy all the way down here, I don't think this is going to ignore it. So let's go ahead and demonstrate here. So if we tell this guy to jump, what he should do is jump whatever instruction was right there. Note that he didn't jump this one. Okay, so let's go ahead and get this guy set back up, and he should wind up skipping this instruction set when he comes back across the other way. So here we go. This is the very next instruction, so he should skip that instruction. Note that he did. Cool. Now, if you don't want it to forcibly jump, what you could do is go ahead and use a Boolean function. So right now, what I'm going to do is write the value true to the stack. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick just to demonstrate. I'm going to have a jump next. So by default, without the unconditional skip, the normal jump will only work if the stack, the current value, is true. So let's go ahead and let this guy run. I'm going to push the true value to the stack, which we'll see right here. Now I'll have him stop just so you can see that true is currently the value on the stack. When he passes over the jump function, he's going to read that true value, pull it off the stack, and execute. Cool. If the topmost value is false, which it's about to be, you'll note that when he goes to do the jump, it's going to pull the false off of there, and it's not going to jump it. It's going to go ahead and get stuck again. Now the last set of instructions to be shown here are pretty nifty. The first one I'm going to show you is Redstone Pulse. What this is going to do is it's going to emit a pulse of redstone when the execution is, or the instruction is executed. So let's go ahead and set this up to run and see what happens. So when he passes over this, because he's default execute immediately, he's going to emit a redstone pulse as he travels over the line. Cool, right? Your other option here is to pulse redstone to whatever is currently on the socket. And for that, it's a slightly different instruction set. It's this one right here called socket signal. So remember, some sockets over here needed a redstone signal to run, specifically the item shifter. So this would be a good example of when you have an item shifter on your servo. What you could do is you could control it with a Redstone Pulse, that in this case the socket pulse winds up going to the item shifter instead of applying to the redstone here. So if this guy were to run, if there was an item shifter on there, it would apply a Redstone Pulse to that guy. You'll notice that he would have spun, or he would have done whatever if he was a item shifter. By the way, I'm out of power, which is why this thing is running slow. Make sure you have a decent set of power set up somewhere so that this thing can continue moving. Now, one other note about your socket signal here. So I'm going to remove socket signal. I'm going to go ahead and put Redstone Pulse back. Remember that some instruction sets are disabled when there's a Redstone Pulse applied to them. So keep that in mind, because if you have, for example, a set point over here, and this thing's moving fast enough, he might wind up ignoring that set point instruction. So let's get this guy moving again and see what happens. Now, if he was moving fast enough, he might have ignored that, so just be careful. So here I've got this guy running at a full speed. If I try and flip him, for example, upwards, he'll go there. But you'll notice when he came across again, he didn't flip until he came backwards, right? So he didn't go back. Now he does, because he's moving fast enough that the redstone signal is impacting the instruction set. So just keep that in mind. It's a possibility that it might wind up being a problem for you. And then the final instruction piece that I'm going to show you guys is the item shifter control. What this does is allows you to control the item shifter if there is one installed on this thing. So you can see he just picked up my hopper, by the way. So if there's an item shifter here, you can set it to import or export items, set the transfer limit, set the target slot, and stream transfer versus pulse transfer exact, pulse transfer sum, and all that stuff that you could check out. So basically, there's a long set of instructions that you can apply to the item shifter control, and this allows you to do a lot of complicated stuff, including what target to target, so what target slot to go into, how much to transfer, and you'll notice that the item shifter control is one of the ones that can read integers. So if you set the transfer limit and you have an integer like 6 on there, it'll set the transfer limit to 6, or the target slot to 4, or whatever. So lots of craziness with servos. Obviously, some can get more complicated than others. If you want to just do some basic things with them, it's pretty easy to do. If you want to get really complicated with them, you absolutely can. One of the great things about Minecraft, you can kind of do things however you want. Super complex or just basic and simple. Alright guys, the last thing I want to show you before we wrap up the segment here is this nifty little mechanic called the clay sculpture system. Basically what you can do is you can get a sculpture, which is just a piece of clay, and a wood slab, any kind of wood slab that you want. The other thing you're going to need is a sculpting tool. Okay, this guy is a stick and a piece of clay. Cool? Now what we can do with this sculpting tool is sculpt the clay in any way we want. By default, once you first get your sculpting tool, it's going to be in move mode. Okay, and what that means is that when you right click on the face of a block, it's going to move it in that direction. So when you right click on the top, it's going to move up. When you right click on the left side, it's going to move to the left. If you shift right click, it's going to move in the opposite direction. Pretty cool. So you can move it up and down or side to side, however you want. You can move it towards you or away from you, etc., etc. You can also place another piece of clay on the board, and you can do that by either clicking on the board or clicking on the existing piece of clay, and it'll kind of add on to it. And each piece of clay can be sculpted separately. So I can move this piece of clay up, and I can move this piece of clay down, etc., etc. I can move this one out and away or towards me, however I want it to go. Pretty cool. So lots of things you can do with the sculpting tool. Now, if you shift right click on the ground, it's going to change it from move to stretch mode. And what this does is allow you to stretch out your clay. So if you click on a particular side, it's going to stretch that piece of clay outwards. And if you shift click, it's going to stretch it back in and compress it back down. So you can do some pretty nifty designs with this if you're somebody who's way more artistic than me, which is pretty much everyone. So you can stretch things out and do all kinds of nifty designs and sculptures, or you can have something like this and maybe move it in here. Let's see, and then I'll move it closer. I don't even know what I'm doing. So long story short, you can do some cool stuff. Now if you take this sculpting tool that has the move or stretch, and you'll notice that the top word is what it's currently set to and the bottom word is what the other option is, you'll get a rotate tool. And this guy's cool. Rotate allows you to either rotate global, which, check this out, will rotate this guy, or shift click to rotate him another way. Now finally, if you craft your sculpting tool here, you'll get reset rotation, which will, as you guessed, reset the rotation of the block. So if it were rotated, so we can go through the different settings here, get this guy to a rotate position. Let's rotate it like that. Now if we set it to the reset rotation, that'll just bring it back to its original default reset rotation. Cool, right? Now the final thing you can do with this is pretty nifty. Let's take a look. You can get a sculpting tool that can mold the sculpture. But before you do that, you're going to have to go ahead and pick this up. Now, if you wanted to just remove like a clay ball that you didn't want on there anymore, you could just go ahead and break that with any tool, and it'll just give you back your clay ball. But if you hold Shift and break it, you'll pick up the sculpture as a whole. Neat. And when you place it back down, it should kind of, look about the same as to when you had it before. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and mold the sculpture by placing it near some heaters. Now, I've got a setup of heaters over here. I've got 4 of them to kind of speed this up, and I've also got this nifty little mold. So let's see, if I click this one, need wood slab and 1 clay. Okay, cool. So let me get a wood slab and a clay, and I click on it, I should get a copy of that sculpture. Neat. So let me go ahead and pick this up. Hopefully this will work. Ah, cool. Sculpture. 1 part. Bisque. Whatever that means. There we go. Okay, cool. So this thing is going to obviously cook up. We've got a pretty big sculpture here. Let's come back in a minute when it's done cooking up. There we go. We finished that thing, and we can see here now that if I were to shift break this thing, hopefully this will work. There it is. Cool. So I've got my nifty little sculpture, which is terrible because I'm awesome at art. And then I can go ahead and right-click this sculpting tool that has the mold sculpture. And because that one's been fired, boom, I can get an exact copy of it and then start doing more with it. So if you unlike me, had some artistic skills here, you could probably come up with some cool stuff to do. I, unfortunately, cannot because I'm not that good at art. But, you can come up with some nifty designs with this sculpting tool. And with that, guys, I think we can wrap up the Factorization mod spotlight. So I hope you guys enjoyed checking it out. Factorization is definitely a cool mod, adds some neat features. I really like the servos, and I'm going to try and use them in a couple different builds coming up. If I can come up with a nifty place to use them, I think there's some cool stuff I could do with it. So for now, Direwolf20 signing off. Hope you enjoyed the video. Take it easy.